Hi, today you're going to learn how to use APIs via Python. So this app will focus on using APIs, and the next app after that is going to focus on creating APIs. Now, I know this doesn't make sense for most of you because you don't know what APIs are, but in the next video I'll explain what an API is, so everything will be clear for you. And then after that video we'll go and code and you'll understand even further what an API is in practice. So with that said, I'll talk to you in the next video. Thanks. Hey, in this video we're going to talk about APIs. So by the end of this video, you'll know what an API is. You'll have a good understanding of APIs. And many people have a hard time to get a grasp of APIs. But this video will be based on examples, so I guarantee you will understand what APIs are. So let's get rid of the boring aspect of the word first. What does API mean? Well, API stands for Application Programming Interface. So that's just for you to know. Now let's look at an example so that you can understand what really an API is. Here on the left, I've opened a news website. Here. And here on the right, I have opened an API. Now, as you might know already, a website can be built in Python and also other languages, but Python is one of the programming languages which can be used to code a website. So this is an app, a web app. Now this here on the right is also an app. So this was a web app and this is an API app, you can say, or simply you can say an API. So this API can also be built in Python. So you code the API and you make it available as it is here right now. So when or who uses a website and when and who uses an API? Well, a website can be used by humans. So people, users, visitors who browse the web, everyone. And a website is readable by humans. So we have these pictures and text in bold and other fonts, so everything looks nice and tidy. Whereas the API is meant to be read by computers. So here, this API is also showing news. So we can read down here some news about Tesla. Automakers around the world are scrambling to secure raw materials, etc. So this also contains news, but these news are rendered in data structures such as JSON. So usually these are in JSON format, which looks like a Python dictionary. So for example, we have the status here. Okay, this is the status of the web page. So the API is telling the computer that the page was loaded successfully. And we have this total results of articles, news. And then somewhere else in here we have some other parentheses where the news starts and so on. So it's a list of news. Now, what do I mean when I say this data are read by computers? Well, specifically I mean that some apps will read this data, even this web app. So for example, let's say we want to build a web app where we show news. So our web app is going to get the news from somewhere, right? And that somewhere can be an API. So our web app, as we are coding it in Python, the web app can get this URL. So this is a URL which points to this particular page with this news. And so our Python code can point to this URL and then the Python code can load this data. So we get this data in a Python dictionary and then we render those data on our web app. So basically this app here, the Yahoo website, is also getting the data from some APIs, most likely. So the code base of this is querying these data, loading them on a dictionary or list or whatever, and then displaying them here on the website. So that's why APIs are called APIs, so Application Programming Interface. So it's an app meant to be used by other apps. So in this case, this website might be using this app. And in other cases, as you'll see throughout these lectures, we're going to use this API in our email automation app. So we're going to get news and we're going to parse them in Python and then send those news in a good readable format by email. So the email app will be the app which will use this API in our case. So it could be a web app, it could be an email app, it could also be a desktop app with a graphical user interface, or a mobile app. So all these apps are able to query data from this kind of APIs, and you learn exactly that in this app, how to use an API. And then in the next app after that, we're going to go one step further and create an API via Python. So first we use the API in this app and then we create an API in the next app. So you'll have a deep understanding of APIs. Now this particular API here is a REST API, or RESTful API in other words. So that's a specific type of APIs and it is the most used API. Therefore, REST APIs will be our focus throughout these lectures as well. So with that, we're ready to see how we can get data from APIs and use them in our apps. So I'll see you in the next video. Every morning I receive these news about a particular topic, Tesla in this case. I receive this news by email automatically, and the app that sends me these emails is an app built in Python, which I built, and in this video I want to show you how you can also build this. So we'll build it together, and so you can also get these news to your email address. Let's do it. Go to PyCharm and create a new project. I already created an empty project here, so I'm ready to code it. So create a new main.py file and start to think about how we can build this program. Now this program is not going to have a graphical user interface, so we can skip the phase where we design the front-end interface. Otherwise, that would be the first step, designing the front-end interface. Since we don't have that interface, then we can think of building the program by thinking of this path. So how can we go from the input data to the output? Which are the input data and what is the output? First, define that in your mind, and then it should be clearer where you can start and where you can finish with your program. So the input data should come from somewhere. Usually we had them in CSV file or .txt files or Excel files in the case of the invoice app, which we built previously. So by having the data in those files, we started from loading those files into Python data frames in our script. In this case, we also want to start from getting the data from the API to Python. So in this case, what we want to use is not pandas, but it's another library called requests. This is a third-party library, so you need to install it. Now, what does the request library do? What can we use it for? Well, let me explain it to you by looking at this web page, finance.yahoo.com. Now, the way we open this web page on our browser is by visiting this web page. So we type in finance.yahoo.com and that loads the content of this web page. So in this case, we're using the browser to get the content of this web page. So this content is stored somewhere on a server, right? Where the web app, the Yahoo website, is hosted. And we get it from the browser. But you can also get it from Python. So in that case, you don't type the URL in your browser, but you type it in Python. So that would be https://finance.yahoo.com. So let's store this in a string. So this has to be a string since this is text. So we store it as a string type. Then, once we have the URL as a string, we use the requests get function. So this is a function. If I click on this and go to implementations, we'll see that this is a function defined in this request library. And this function gets a URL as an argument. And once you do that, you want to get the content of the web page using request. So this variable, don't confuse that variable with this. That's the module, the library itself. So it's in plural form with S. And this is just a variable. It could be R also. R here, R there. And so then you do text.text. That's a property of this object. So this creates a requests object type, just like we have string types. This is a special type as well. And then print out the content. If you run the script, what you will get in the command line is the web page, the same web page that we got when we visited that URL on the browser. The only difference is that the browser knows how to render the web page. So the web page is built in HTML code, and the browser is a program which knows how to render HTML. So it displays the web page in a nice visual format. But the command line doesn't know how to do that. So it just shows the web page in an uglier format, so to say, which is not very readable by us. So it's not really useful to use the requests library to open web pages via Python, because all you get is a bunch of code which is not readable. However, the requests library is useful when you want to browse an API which has this nice format, which is readable by computers. So this is stored in dictionary, and you have items and so on. So let's now go in here, and instead of passing the URL of this web page, we pass the URL of the API. For that, you need to do something beforehand. We want to go to newsapi.org, this website, newsapi.org. And then you want to sign up for an account. You should see a button somewhere here. Once you sign up, you can log in and you should see this view. So I've already logged in here and you should see this button. So go there to get an API key. And here you should see your API key. So copy that key and then go to Python, create a variable such as API key, and paste that key and store it as a string. So it should be around double quotes or single quotes. Once you do that, you want to go back to home, and here you should see the API documentation. For example, we have this example here. That's an example of a URL if you want to get news about Tesla. So if I copy that URL, and I paste it in the URL variable. And since I was logged in, the website here has injected my API key to this URL automatically. In your case, this should be your own API. And so that's my API. If you don't have that, you should put your API here. So you can find this URL attached in the lecture resources if you didn't get it, if you didn't find it here on the website. So please find it attached in the resources. But then you need to change the API key to your own API key before you put it in this script. Since this is too long, I'll break it here, and that will not damage the string. So it's still one string, but split in across different lines. So now we're ready to run the script. Run, and what you'll get is this. So that's the same content that we get when we browse this page from the browser. The difference now is that we can make use of these data since we are working with a programming language. So we can parse, we can extract this data, and that would not be useful in the case of the browser. Here you can just see this data, you can just read them, you cannot use them for other purposes. So in our case, we want to use this data to send them by email to a particular email address. So let's do that in the next video. Thanks a lot for following this. I'll talk to you later. Hi, in this video we will continue to build our app, which will send emails with news every morning to a particular email address. So we're getting the data from this particular API, the newsapi.org. And this URL is an example of an endpoint. An endpoint is the actual URL. So you can say the endpoint, you can say the URL, and this particular endpoint gets us data about Tesla, news about Tesla. But you can change this to another topic and you'll get data for that topic. So how do these data look like? Well, you saw that already. So it looks like a dictionary, but is it a dictionary really? Well, that's something we can check by printing out the type of the content. So the content is what we get by using that text property, by applying that text property to request that variable. So don't confuse that variable with requests. And if I run this, we will see that this is a string. So this is just text. And that means we cannot really extract particular information from that content. We need a data structure which is more flexible, which is more structured, such as a dictionary or a list. So even though that content looks like a dictionary, it is actually just a plain string. To get a dictionary from that, you should apply JSON here with parentheses. If you run that code now you'll see that this is a dictionary. The type of content now is a dictionary. So if you print the actual content variable, here on the terminal you'll see the same content as we saw before, but the difference now is that we can apply indexing syntax to extract a particular value from that big piece of data. For example, you see that this is a dictionary, it has this key status and its value okay, then we have the comma, so that's the first pair of key and value, this one, and then we have the second pair of key and value, total results, and its value 12407, and then we have this key and its value is this list. It continues, so it's a list which has this dictionary. So we need to extract this list. So let's do here content articles. So articles comes as a string. You see it's with quotes here. And if I print this out now, what you'll see is the value of the article's key. So it's this list. Now, to better understand how these data are structured, we could use the debugging tool of PyCharm, because the debugging interface will give us a better view of this data structure. You'll see what I mean exactly. So let's start the debugging. I'll put the debugger, the breakpoint at the last line here. So before I create this content, so if I right click now and I go to debug main, what will happen is that the script will be executed up to this line. So this line here where the breakpoint is will not be executed. And so here in the debugger tab, so in the debug tab here, and then the debugger tab in here, you'll see all the variables that are declared up to this point. So for example, we have the API key, the contents, requests, etc. So we're interested about the content variable. So we access the value of articles which corresponds to this list, right? If you dig deeper into this article's value, you'll see that this is a list. So this is a list which has dictionaries as values. You see dict, 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 and each dictionary has 8 items. So the list has 100 items, each dictionary has 8 items, and then if you dig deeper, you'll dig deeper into the data structure. You see that each dictionary has the source key with its values and so on. So now we can go to the console tab, and here we have all those variables. We can access all these variables. So for example, content. So that's a content, and content articles. We get this from content articles, and the length of content articles is 100. Sorry, I did the typo here, not articles. Yeah, so it's 100 items for this list. And therefore, since this is a list with many items, we can do a for loop such as for item or for article in content articles, a colon here, print article. So each list is a dictionary. And what do we need from that dictionary? Well, you can get the source, you can get the author, you can get the title of each post. So author, title, description. So let's get the description, article description. Execute that, and you're going to get the description of all the 100 articles. So similarly, you can get the title. Let me go back here and write title, execute, and those are the titles of all the 100 articles. So the debugger helps us to dig into the data, to understand the data, and then you can stop the debugger using that button, remove the breakpoint, and do the same code, write the same code that you wrote in the debugger, which was for article in content articles, print article title. So if you run this code, you should get the same titles that we got previously. So that's a very good use of the debugger. When you have complex data structures, you can stop the script at a certain point, and then you can go to the debug tab and explore the data in the debug console, which was this one in here. So here you see the variables, and here you see the console where you can write some code. So we're doing very well. We made a request here. We got a dictionary with the data, and we accessed article titles and descriptions. So you can just duplicate that and print out the description. So we're simply printing out the titles and the descriptions for now in the command line, but the next step is to get these titles and descriptions and send them by email using the smtplib library, which we have covered in the previous apps. So with that, we can apply the first commit for our app. So I'll go to VCS and enable version control integration with git, create a .gitignore file, add it to the repository. Venv and .idea will be excluded from the tracking, and main.py should be added because it's in red. So go to git, add it to the repository, and perhaps create a readme.md file. So that's what this app does, and let's commit the changes. This is day 27. Access the news titles and descriptions and commit the changes. So that was about this video. Thanks a lot. Hey, in this video I'll show you the solution to the problem which I gave you in the previous video. The problem is that you should send the articles by email. And currently I didn't change the code yet. I'll do that in this video, since I think this was a tough exercise, so I want to show you step by step the solution. Now there might be different solutions for this, and the one I think about is that instead of printing out the article titles and the descriptions, we want to construct a string. Because if you look at the email function here, sends email, the input for this function is a string, so the message itself is a string. Therefore, we should build up a string which will contain all those 100 news. And to build a string, I'll do it like this. I would say a variable, an empty string first, and then as I iterate over these articles, I would say body is equal to body plus article title plus a break line, which is denoted by this \n symbol, plus article description, plus perhaps 2 break lines. So you could do 2 times \n. So what that will do is it will go through all the articles, and in the first iteration body will be equal to an empty string. So we say an empty string plus the title plus a break line plus the description plus 2 break lines, and that will update the body variable to contain the first title of the first article and the description of that first article. And then the loop will go to the second article, and it will update the body variables by adding the existing content of the body variable plus the second title and the second description for the second articles. I can show you the results step by step by adding here a breakpoint and debugging this script. And so currently body is empty, it's an empty string, you can see it here, but if I go one step further, body is now updated with 1 article. We can view it like that. So that's the title of the article and that's the description. So we're still in the first iteration. So the loop is going again. It's about to execute the second line again, so we need to press it 1 more time. And then we can view the string. So that was the first title with the first description. That's the second title with the second description. And so now you go again to this button to execute that first line. Execute it, again execute it. So you execute both lines and then you see this again. And the third news article has been added and so on. So let me stop the debugger. So that means that by the end of the loop, if we exit the loop here and we print out the body and we execute this, what we're going to get is all the titles with all the descriptions. So now we can import the function of send email, which is send email. So from send email, the script, import send email, the function. And then in here you say send email and provide the body as the message. You can do it like that, or you can say message is equal to body. So message is the argument of that function. And I'll put my password here as well. And then you don't want to execute this script, so you want to execute the main.py file, which calls the send email function. Now, if you got this error, you can fix this by updating the body, by converting it into UTF-8. UTF-8. And actually you want to store, to update the variable. So the new variable will be equal to the existing variable, but converted into this format. So run again. and that should give you a new email to your email account. Now, I want to talk about another possible error you might get with this program, and that error is this one in here. So it's a type error. It says that we cannot concatenate a string with a non-type. You can only concatenate strings to strings. So in line 18 is where the error occurs. So in my view, body is a string. We are sure about that because we have it here. But article title is not a string, it is a non-type. But to make sure that this is the case, we can debug this app. For that, we can place a breakpoint to the next line after this error occurred. So in here, and then right click and debug. And so Python will execute the script and it will stop where the error occurred, and we should see here the current value of the article variable. So the loop is going through all the articles, but one of the articles or more, so at least one of the articles have that title set to a none value. And actually we find out that here. So you see down here, title is equal to none. So none is not a string, none is a particular type in Python. And therefore we get an error here because we are adding this non-type to a string, which is not possible. So that gives a type error. So this particular article was giving us this error. So now we should handle that error. And one way to handle it is to have a conditional here. For example, if article title is none, or more specifically, we want to check if it's not none, then we want to perform this operation. So that means this code will not be executed for articles which have a none value for title. So with that, we can execute again normally, and this time we shouldn't be getting any errors, and we should be receiving an email here. Yeah, there it is. So that's the email, no errors. And I'll commit the changes. So this is day 27. Send an email with titles and descriptions, with news titles and descriptions. Commit, and that's it for today. So I'll talk to you in the next videos. Thanks a lot.